The late afternoon sun, a molten orb descending towards the horizon, bled fiery orange and bruised purple across the sky. Its rays slanted low, stretching shadows like grasping fingers across the impossibly green, meticulously manicured lawns of Maple Creek. This subdivision wasn't merely a collection of houses. It was a curated exhibit of suburban perfection, a place where conformity wasn't just encouraged, it was the unwritten commandment, ruthlessly enforced by the iron will and unwavering gaze of the Homeowners Association president, Carolyn Fletcher. To the residents who exchanged hushed whispers behind the perceived safety of cupped hands and hastily closed doors, she was known by another name, a moniker whispered like a curse, Karen. It was a title burnished to a high shine through years of petty tyranny, fueled by an unshakable conviction in her own absolute righteousness and an encyclopedic knowledge of the HOA bylaws, which she wielded like a weapon. Mark Henderson let out a long, weary sigh, the sound swallowed by the ambient hum of suburban life. He reached down, his fingers familiar with the dials, adjusting the flow rate on his daughter Lily's portable oxygen concentrator. The machine, a small miracle of modern technology, sat faithfully beside the porch swing where Lily was settling herself, her small legs dangling inches above the painted wood, kicking slightly with restless energy. Moving to Maple Creek 6 months prior had seemed, at the time, like a beacon of logic. It promised a quiet neighborhood, lauded schools just a short drive away, and, crucially, a shorter commute to Mark's demanding new job downtown. What the glossy brochures and the smiling real estate agent hadn't detailed, what no introductory packet mentioned, was the reality of the HOA. He hadn't anticipated this carefully constructed piece being lorded over by a woman who seemed to patrol the pristine cul-de-sacs with the relentless zeal of a 4-star general inspecting freshly scrubbed barracks, searching for infractions invisible to the untrained eye. Lily, a bright spark at 8 years old, possessed lungs that hadn't quite finished their developmental blueprint before she entered the world. Yet, her spirit remained gloriously undimmed, her laughter infectious despite the constant, unobtrusive presence of the clear plastic cannula resting beneath her small nose. Most days were good days. Most days, the quiet, rhythmic hum of the portable concentrator was sufficient, providing the supplemental oxygen her body needed as she navigated childhood's adventures. But contingency was key. Her pulmonologist, a kind man with serious eyes, had been adamant. A backup system was non-negotiable. A full-sized emergency oxygen tank, the heavy-duty kind found in hospital rooms, needed to be readily accessible, a silent sentinel for the what-ifs that haunted Mark's quieter moments. Their rented ranch-style house, charming but compact, presented a logistical challenge. After careful consideration, the covered front porch emerged as the only truly practical location. It was mere feet from Lily's bedroom window, offering the quickest possible access in a respiratory crisis. Mark had positioned the green metal cylinder discreetly behind a large, decorative terracotta planter filled with vibrant geraniums. To his eyes, it was nearly invisible, a necessary precaution blending into the background, a silent guardian watching over his daughter. To the hawk-like eyes of Carolyn Fletcher, however, it was anything but unobtrusive. It was an aberration, a glaring violation of the meticulously crafted aesthetic harmony she fiercely protected, a blight on the perfect tapestry of Maple Creek. The first official salvo arrived not with a knock, but tucked with pointed deliberation under the windshield wiper of Mark's sedan, parked squarely in his own driveway. The paper was crisp, heavy bond, bearing the official HOA letterhead. Unauthorized equipment storage, the heading declared in stark, impersonal font. It cited Bylaw 7, Section C, a vaguely worded clause regarding the prohibition of visible clutter on porches, patios, and front-facing property. Mark, suppressing an initial wave of irritation, decided a direct approach was best. He walked the short distance down the immaculate sidewalk to Carolyn's residence, a 2-story colonial that looked like it had been lifted directly from a magazine spread, its white paint pristine, its shutters a perfectly contrasting shade of forest green. He found her in the front garden, kneeling on a padded mat, pruning her prize-winning rose bushes with what appeared to be surgical precision. She wore immaculate white gardening gloves, shielding her hands from the messy reality of soil and thorns. "Carolyn," Mark began, holding up the offending notice. He kept his voice calm, reasonable. About this notice. She didn't grace him with an immediate look, her attention focused entirely on a flawlessly formed rosebud. Snip! The small, sharp sound of the clippers was unnervingly decisive. Mr. Henderson. Her voice, when it finally came, was smooth as river stone, but carried an unmistakable edge, like polished granite hiding a sharp fracture. Is there some sort of problem? It's about the oxygen tank, Mark explained, maintaining his patient tone. He gestured back towards his house. The one on our porch. It's medical equipment for my daughter, Lily. It's her emergency backup supply. Carolyn finally turned then, straightening slightly. Her eyes, magnified by the lenses of her stylish glasses, swept over him with a cool, detached appraisal that made Mark feel like an untidy specimen under a microscope. Mr. Henderson, the bylaws are quite clear. They exist for a reason. She paused, letting the weight of unspoken rules hang in the air. Porches are considered extensions of the home's visual presentation to the community. They are not designated as storage facilities, regardless of the perceived purpose of the item in question. But this isn't just any item, Mark insisted, trying to keep the rising tide of frustration from his voice. He needed her to understand. It's medically necessary. It's vital for my daughter's safety. I can provide doctor's notes, extensive medical documentation, anything you need. That won't be necessary, she interrupted smoothly, already turning back to her meticulously groomed roses, the dismissal clear in her posture. The rules, Mr. Henderson, apply equally to all residents. Without exception. Another decisive snip echoed in the quiet afternoon air. Aesthetics maintain property values. Standards create desirability. Surely, even you can appreciate the fundamental importance of maintaining certain standards in a community like Maple Creek. She snipped a final, perfect bud, holding it up momentarily as if admiring a trophy. Find another place for it, she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Inside the house, or perhaps in your garage. The garage isn't practical, Mark countered, the frustration finally leaking into his tone. He felt his jaw tighten. In an emergency, accessing it quickly is paramount. Seconds count. And inside, the layout near her room makes it extremely difficult, potentially hazardous even. The porch is unequivocally the safest, most readily accessible location for her. Carolyn straightened fully now, slowly, deliberately pulling off her pristine white gloves, finger by finger. Her gaze was direct, cold. Maple Creek maintains certain community standards, Mr. Henderson. We pride ourselves on our neighborhood's appearance. She paused, her words carefully chosen, dripping with condescension. Perhaps, if your family requires special accommodations that visibly detract from that appearance, this particular community isn't the appropriate environment for you. The implication struck Mark like a physical blow, the suggestion that his daughter's medical needs made them undesirable, unfit for Maple Creek's perfection. You have 7 days to comply with the bylaw, she stated flatly, her voice devoid of any warmth or compromise. Good day. Without waiting for a response, she turned with a crisp pivot and walked briskly up her walkway and into her immaculate house, the door closing behind her with quiet finality. Mark was left standing on the sun-drenched sidewalk, the useless HOA notice crumpled tightly in his fist, a knot of anger and disbelief tightening in his gut. He refused to be intimidated. He meticulously drafted an email to the full HOA board, laying out the situation clearly and calmly. He attached scanned copies of Lily's essential medical records, highlighting the relevant diagnoses. He included a strongly worded letter from Dr. Ramirez, Lily's pulmonologist, explicitly stating the medical necessity for the emergency oxygen tank and emphasizing the critical importance of immediate, unimpeded access. He hoped reason, backed by documented proof, would prevail over Carolyn's rigid interpretation. The reply arrived within 24 hours. It was curt, dismissive, and bore the unmistakable stylistic hallmarks of Carolyn Fletcher's influence, even if her name wasn't signed at the bottom. Exceptions to established community bylaws cannot be made, as this would set an undesirable precedent. Please ensure adherence to the community rules as outlined. Your prompt compliance is appreciated. The knot in Mark's stomach tightened further. He recognized Carolyn's archetype instantly. He'd encountered variations of her personality throughout his career, though usually in starkly different, more overtly dangerous contexts. Individuals who clung to rules and regulations like life rafts in a stormy sea, using the rigid structure not for order, but to exert control, to project an image of power that often masked deep-seated insecurities or simmering prejudices. He knew then that reason wouldn't work. Documentation wouldn't sway her. This was about power, not practicality or compassion. He opened a new file on his computer. He began documenting everything. Every interaction, however brief. Every notice received, carefully scanned and dated. Every passive-aggressive comment Carolyn made when she inevitably drove past their house, her eyes lingering perhaps a second too long on the porch, or on Lily playing innocently in the yard. He noted the times, the dates, the exact words spoken, building a meticulous record of the escalating harassment. The following week brought a predictable escalation. Warnings, now more strongly worded, began appearing tucked under their front door, often deposited in the pre-dawn hours or late at night, avoiding direct confrontation. These new notices cited mounting daily fines for noncompliance. The pressure was intensifying, designed to grind him down. Neighbors offered sympathetic whispers, fleeting moments of solidarity offered in lowered tones when Carolyn wasn't within earshot. A quick murmur of "she's impossible" at the mailbox, a shared eye roll across driveways. But their eyes invariably slid away when Carolyn Fletcher's car cruised slowly down the street, her head held high. They knew her methods well. Public shaming during the sparsely attended HOA meetings, veiled but pointed threats about property liens for unpaid fines, a relentless campaign of nitpicking minor infractions until the targeted resident either capitulated or, more often, simply moved out, defeated and exhausted. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable from across the street, a kind elderly woman with gentle eyes and a garden full of windmills, caught Mark's wife, Sarah, as she was bringing in groceries. Leaning closer conspiratorially, Mrs. Gable quietly recounted the saga of the Peterson family 2 years prior. Carolyn, she whispered, had forced them to repaint their perfectly ordinary front door not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. The offense. The shade of blue, while purchased directly from the HOA's pre-approved supplier list and color palette, was deemed by Carolyn's discerning eye to be fractionally inconsistent with the established aesthetic guidelines. The Petersons, worn down by the constant scrutiny and thinly veiled threats, had eventually sold their house at a loss and left Maple Creek altogether. "She wears you down, dearie," Mrs. Gable had concluded sadly, patting Sarah's arm. "She just wears you down." The tension continued to simmer, a low-grade fever infecting the otherwise tranquil, sun-dappled peace of the suburban enclave. Mark felt an increasingly fierce protectiveness towards Lily, a shield extending beyond her physical health to encompass her bright, vulnerable spirit. He refused to let her feel singled out, ashamed, or less than because of the medical equipment that kept her safe. Yet, he couldn't help but notice the way Carolyn's gaze sometimes lingered on Lily when she was outside playing, just for a moment. In those fleeting glances, Mark saw a flicker of something cold, something deeply disapproving, that chilled him more than any official notice. Then came the Tuesday afternoon. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with the oppressive humidity that often precedes a violent summer thunderstorm. The sky was darkening ominously at the edges. Mark had just returned home, drained after a particularly long day navigating bureaucratic hurdles at the city's emergency management headquarters. His new role as City Fire Marshal was proving even more demanding than anticipated, requiring long hours as he worked to settle in and get up to speed. Sarah was out, making a quick run for groceries before the anticipated storm broke. Lily was safely inside, happily engrossed in constructing an elaborate castle from colorful wooden blocks in the center of the living room floor. Her portable concentrator, her daily companion, hummed its quiet, faithful rhythm beside her. And on the porch, partially obscured by the terracotta planter but undeniably, defiantly present, stood the emergency oxygen tank, its green metal surface cool to the touch. Sentinel. Mark was upstairs in the bedroom, loosening his tie, kicking off his city-issue boots, the weight of the day pressing down on him. That's when he heard it. A faint, unexpected scraping sound from the direction of the front porch. It was followed by a distinct, sharp clicking noise, unnervingly familiar, like a plastic cap being forcefully unscrewed. A prickle of immediate unease traced its way down his spine. Something felt wrong. He moved swiftly, silently, towards the front window overlooking the porch, angling the blinds just enough to peer outside. His blood turned to ice water in his veins. Carolyn Fletcher stood on his porch. Her face was a mask of grim, righteous determination, her jaw set stubbornly. In her hand, she gripped a large, industrial-sized plastic bottle of bleach, the potent, corrosive kind used for heavy-duty sanitation, not delicate laundry. With shocking, deliberate intent, she was methodically pouring the thick, clear liquid directly onto the sensitive valve assembly at the top of Lily's emergency oxygen tank. Mark didn't think, he reacted. Years of ingrained fire and rescue training slammed into the forefront of his mind, overriding conscious thought. Oxygen and bleach. A potentially catastrophic combination. Highly concentrated, pressurized oxygen could react violently, explosively, with certain contaminants. Bleach, particularly industrial-strength sodium hypochlorite, was a powerful oxidizer. At the absolute best-case scenario, the corrosive chemical would contaminate the medical-grade oxygen, rendering the entire tank useless in an emergency, potentially damaging the delicate internal mechanisms. At worst, the reaction could be far more volatile, especially under pressure. He shut down the horrifying possibilities that flashed through his professional mind. He flung open the front door, bursting onto the porch, his voice cracking through the humid air like a whip. "Carolyn, stop. What in God's name are you doing?" She jumped violently, startled by his sudden appearance, sloshing more of the caustic bleach onto the tank's valve and the painted porch floor beneath it. She spun to face him, her expression morphing rapidly from focused concentration to pure, unadulterated defiance. "Henderson, I warned you. I gave you ample warning. This eyesore," she spat the word, gesturing towards the tank with the now empty bleach bottle, "is a flagrant violation of the community bylaws. I am simply cleaning up the neighborhood." A sharp, acrid smell instantly assaulted Mark's nostrils, the pungent, unmistakable stench of chlorine, but mixed with something else, something sharp, metallic, and deeply wrong. Reactive. Simultaneously, a faint but distinct hissing sound emanated from the tank valve where the bleach was pooling, eating away at the seals and metal. "That's pure oxygen, Carolyn," Mark yelled, struggling to keep his voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. "Medical grade. Pressurized. What you're doing is incredibly, unbelievably dangerous." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed, clutching the empty bleach bottle like a shield. Her voice dripped with disdain. "It's just a harmless metal canister. If you had simply followed the clearly stated rules in the first place, none of this would be necessary. People who require this sort of cumbersome equipment shouldn't be allowed to impose it visually on the rest of us who maintain standards." Suddenly, the faint hissing intensified, escalating to an audible, angry sizzle. A pale, greenish-yellow vapor began to curl ominously from the compromised valve assembly. Wisps of toxic gas coalesced rapidly, thickening into a visible, sickening cloud. The chlorine from the bleach was reacting aggressively with the metal components of the valve, brass, possibly trace impurities, a reaction dangerously accelerated by the presence of pure oxygen slowly seeping from the damaged seals. The cloud grew with terrifying speed, billowing outwards from the tank, heavy and choking. "Get back," Mark roared, instinctively shoving a stunned, disbelieving Carolyn away from the immediate vicinity of the rapidly deteriorating tank. He pushed her hard, sending her stumbling backwards off the porch steps and onto the lawn. The toxic cloud, heavier than the surrounding air, drifted lazily in the thick humidity, pooling near the ground like a malevolent fog. It crept insidiously towards the open living room window, just feet away. From inside the house, a piercing electronic alarm suddenly shrieked. Lily's portable oxygen concentrator. Mark knew instantly what it was, the integrated sensors detecting poor ambient air quality. His heart leaped violently into his throat. "Lily! Lily!" He spun, intending to dash towards the house, but the toxic chlorine gas cloud was already flowing over the porch railing like a thick, opaque waterfall. It obscured the front door, a shimmering, greenish-yellow barrier. He couldn't see through it. He couldn't risk breathing it in deeply. Carolyn, staggering back on the grass, began coughing, her eyes watering profusely from the irritating fumes. Yet, her expression remained one of stubborn, infuriating denial. "It's just a bit of bleach smell," she gasped out between coughs. "You're dramatically overreacting, Henderson. That's chlorine gas." Mark roared, his voice raw with fury and fear. "It's poison. My daughter is inside that house. Call 911. Now." She hesitated, her hand hovering uncertainly over the pocket where her phone presumably resided. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, quickly replaced by resentment. "I'm not calling anyone. This is entirely your fault. You brought this volatile situation upon our community. If she can't handle living in a normal neighborhood without this hazardous paraphernalia." Her voice trailed off, choked by another fit of coughing, but her venomous implication hung thick and poisonous in the air, almost as toxic as the cloud itself. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing for Mark. The acrid smell burning his nostrils and lungs, the terrifying, growing cloud obscuring his home and his child, the high-pitched electronic shriek of the concentrator alarm signaling Lily's potential suffocation, and this woman, this infuriating, cruel woman, standing there, spitting blame, refusing to summon help. The fire marshal part of his brain slammed into control, overriding the panicked father. Assess, isolate, rescue. The mantra echoed in his head, a familiar rhythm from countless emergency scenes. "Get away from here, Carolyn. Go," he commanded, his voice suddenly stripped of panic, replaced by the sharp, unwavering authority he used at fire grounds and accident sites. It cut through her sputtering protests. He saw movement across the street. Mrs. Gable, her face pale with alarm, peering frantically through her living room blinds. "Mrs. Gable," Mark shouted, projecting his voice clearly. "Call 911. Tell them Fire Marshal requests immediate hazmat response. Chlorine gas leak from a compromised oxygen cylinder. Potential pediatric medical emergency inside." He knew instantly the front entrance was too dangerous, blocked by the densest part of the cloud. Wasting no precious seconds, he sprinted around the side of the house, heading for the back door, praying fervently that Sarah hadn't locked it when she left. Relief flooded him as the knob turned. He burst into the kitchen, instinctively holding his breath, his eyes already stinging fiercely from the fumes that were beginning to infiltrate the house. The chlorine smell was fainter here, but undeniably present and spreading rapidly. He raced towards the living room, his heart pounding against his ribs. He found Lily huddled by the couch, as far from the contaminated front window as she could get. Tears streamed down her small face, mixing with the moisture from her watering eyes. She was coughing weakly, small, hitched sounds that tore at Mark's heart. The concentrator alarm beside her was deafening, a continuous, high-pitched scream. Its digital display flashed a stark, terrifying message in red, low oxygen. Ambient air alert. The machine, designed to draw in surrounding air and concentrate the oxygen, was instead pulling in the toxic chlorine fumes drifting in from the porch. It couldn't function properly in the contaminated environment, and worse, it was potentially concentrating the hazardous gas right next to his daughter. "Daddy," she choked out, her voice small and thin. "It's okay, sweetie, Daddy's here." In one swift motion, he ripped the cannula tubing from her face, simultaneously hitting the power button to silence the shrieking alarm on the malfunctioning concentrator. Every second was critical. He scooped her small, trembling body into his arms, turning her face inwards to shield it against his chest, and ran towards her bedroom located at the back of the house, the area furthest from the porch and the main source of the gas leak. He kicked the bedroom door shut behind them, then quickly grabbed a fluffy bath towel from the nearby linen closet and stuffed it tightly along the bottom edge, creating a makeshift seal against any encroaching fumes. His own lungs burned, his vision blurred by tears. He located her small, portable emergency oxygen canister, the one she carried in her brightly colored backpack for school trips and emergencies away from home. His fingers fumbled slightly with adrenaline as he checked the pressure gauge, thankfully full. He quickly attached the pediatric mask, fitted it snugly but gently over her nose and mouth, and turned the valve. "Breathe deep, Lilybug," he coached, his voice strained but calm. "Nice slow breaths for Daddy. That's it." Her weak coughing began to subside almost immediately as the flow of pure, uncontaminated oxygen filled her lungs. Her eyes, wide with fear, remained fixed on his face, her trust absolute. Mark's own lungs screamed for air, his eyes streamed uncontrollably. He forced himself to take shallow, controlled breaths, conserving what little clean oxygen remained in his system. He knew he couldn't stay here. He needed to secure the scene outside. He needed to deal with Carolyn. He needed the emergency crews. Now, he pulled out his wallet, flipping it open with unsteady hands to the metal badge clipped securely inside. City Fire Marshal. The weight of it felt both heavy and grounding. He took one more deep, burning breath, then cracked open Lily's bedroom window just a fraction. The one on the side wall, facing away from the front porch and the main gas cloud, hoping desperately to introduce some cleaner air into the room without drawing in more toxins. He looked down at his daughter, his brave little girl. "Stay right here. Okay, Lily," he said softly but firmly. "Keep your mask on tight. Daddy has to go help the firefighters outside. The emergency crews are coming very soon." She nodded silently, her small hands clutching the portable canister tightly, her knuckles white. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, his heart aching with a mixture of terror and love, then slipped quietly back out of the room, closing the door firmly behind him, ensuring the towel seal was still in place. He moved quickly, purposefully through the house. He grabbed a damp dishcloth from the kitchen sink, holding it tightly over his nose and mouth as he made his way back towards the front of the house. Peeking cautiously through the living room blinds again, he saw the greenish-yellow cloud was still dense, hovering low over the porch and extending onto the front lawn, though perhaps beginning to slowly disperse in the humid air. Several neighbors were outside now, gathered at what they deemed a safe distance down the street, pointing towards his house, their faces etched with confusion and alarm. He could see Carolyn near the curb, arguing heatedly with Mrs. Gable, gesturing wildly back towards Mark's house, with the empty bleach bottle still clutched in her hand. Unbelievable. Mark took another deep, steadying breath, bracing himself against the lingering fumes. He exited through the back door again, circling swiftly around the side of the house, deliberately approaching the unfolding scene from the side, staying upwind of the remaining gas cloud. The wail of approaching sirens grew rapidly louder, closer. Red and blue lights flashed erratically at the end of the street, cutting through the darkening afternoon. He walked directly towards Carolyn, the wet cloth still held partially over his face. He was still wearing his civilian shirt from work, but his standard-issue fire department trousers and sturdy boots probably looked incongruous. It wasn't his clothes, however, that finally made Carolyn stop her tirade mid-sentence. It was the badge, now clipped prominently and visibly to his belt. Her eyes widened, darting from the gleaming metal badge back to his soot-streaked, determined face. Confusion warred visibly with her ingrained arrogance. "You're," she stammered, her voice losing its strident edge. "Mark Henderson, City Fire Marshal," he stated, his voice cold, steady, and devoid of any emotion except grim authority. He let the title hang in the air for a beat. "And you, Carolyn Fletcher, are under arrest." "Arrest?" she sputtered, color draining from her face, though a tremor of genuine fear finally entered her voice. "Don't be absurd. I was upholding HOA bylaws. It's meticulously documented. He's the one endangering this entire neighborhood with that hazardous tank." The first police cruiser screeched to a halt just feet away. A uniformed officer jumped out, his hand instinctively hovering near his sidearm as he rapidly assessed the chaotic scene. The lingering, strange-smelling cloud, the agitated woman waving a bleach bottle, Mark standing firm with a clearly visible official badge, concerned neighbors watching. "Sir, what's the situation here?" the officer asked, his training directing him to address Mark first, recognizing the badge of authority. "Fire Marshal Henderson." Mark identified himself clearly, his voice carrying over the rising sirens. He nodded curtly towards his porch. "We have an active hazmat situation. Chlorine gas release resulting from a chemical reaction between household bleach and a compromised medical oxygen cylinder valve." He pointed directly, unequivocally, at Carolyn. The perpetrator, his voice was ice, deliberately poured bleach onto the cylinder valve assembly moments ago. "She admitted it to me." He continued rapidly. outlining the critical points. There is one pediatric victim inside the residence who suffered significant exposure. She is currently stabilized on emergency backup oxygen. We need to evacuate the immediate area downwind, establish a perimeter. I need Hazmat here ASAP to contain the source and neutralize the chemical agent. And I want her. He locked eyes with Carolyn, whose face had turned a chalky, pasty white, detained immediately. She directly admitted to causing the hazardous release and, furthermore, initially refused my direct order to call 911 for emergency assistance. As the first police officer cautiously approached Carolyn, reciting the Miranda rights in a firm, clear voice, the first fire engine and the large, specialized hazmat truck arrived simultaneously, their sirens winding down with a final groan. Firefighters, already pulling on heavy turnout gear and SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, masks, spilled out of the rigs, their movements practiced and efficient. Mark immediately intercepted the arriving battalion chief, a man he knew professionally. He rapidly briefed him on the specifics. The chemical agents involved, oxygen, bleach, the status of Lily inside, the urgent need to verify the air quality throughout the house, and the precise location of the compromised oxygen tank on the porch. My daughter, Lily, is in the back bedroom, southwest corner. Mark explained quickly, pointing towards the house. She's stable for now on a portable emergency canister, but the main living area near the front was heavily exposed. The source is the large green E-cylinder on the front porch. Perpetrator poured liquid bleach directly onto the valve assembly. The hazmat team, now fully encased in bulky, airtight level of protective suits, moved methodically towards the porch, carrying sophisticated detection equipment and chemical neutralization agents. Police officers efficiently began establishing a wider perimeter, using yellow incident tape to cordon off the street, calmly instructing the growing crowd of anxious neighbors to return to their homes and close all windows and doors as a precaution. An ambulance crew, alerted to the pediatric exposure, hurried towards Mark, their medical bags ready. My daughter needs a precautionary evaluation, Mark told the lead paramedic, directing them towards the back of the house to avoid the lingering fumes concentrated near the front porch. Access through the rear door is clear. Body cameras on the responding police officers were actively recording, capturing the entire chaotic scene from multiple angles. Carolyn, now handcuffed and standing rigidly beside the police cruiser, seemed to have recovered from her initial shock. She launched into a renewed, furious tirade, her voice rising shrilly. This is absolutely outrageous. A complete abuse of power. I am the duly elected president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association. That tank is an illegal installation. It's an eyesore. It's demonstrably lowering property values. He should be the one arrested for flagrantly violating the community bylaws. My rights are being trampled, violated. Her voice cracked with a mixture of fury and utter disbelief. You can't do this to me. Do you have any idea who I am in this community? The arresting officer remained impassive, continuing patiently. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Silent? I refuse to be silent, she shrieked, straining against the cuffs. This neighborhood has standards. We have rules. Aesthetic integrity is paramount for maintaining our property values. That child, she spat the word with venom, shouldn't even be permitted to live here if she requires that kind of ugly, dangerous equipment visible to everyone. It attracts the wrong element. Mark forced himself to turn away from her hateful, ignorant words, his focus entirely on the emergency response unfolding before him. He watched as the hazmat technicians, moving with careful precision, safely bagged the contaminated oxygen tank in specialized containment materials. Another team meticulously treated the porch area with a spraying neutralizing agent, likely a sodium bicarbonate solution, to mitigate the residual chlorine. A separate firefighter team equipped with sensitive air monitoring devices entered his house through the back door, their objective to confirm the toxic gas levels and ensure the interior was safe. A few minutes later, one of the paramedics emerged from the back door, walking briskly towards Mark, pulling off his disposable gloves. He gave Mark a reassuring thumbs up. Lily's vitals are strong, Marshal. Oxygen saturation is stable at 99% on the supplemental O2. Respiratory rate is normal, lung sounds are clear. No signs of acute respiratory distress currently. We strongly recommend a hospital checkup just to be absolutely safe, given the nature of the exposure, but she seems remarkably okay right now. Relief, profound and overwhelming, washed over Mark in a dizzying wave, making his knees feel weak. He nodded, managing a deep, slightly shaky breath of the rapidly clearing air. He saw Mrs. Gable talking animatedly with another police officer, gesturing emphatically towards the handcuffed Carolyn. Other neighbors, clustered nearby, were also giving statements to officers, their initial fear visibly replaced by burgeoning outrage as the full details of Carolyn's deliberate actions began to circulate through the small crowd. Predictably, news crews, alerted by the scale of the multi-agency emergency response, Hazmat, fire, police, EMS, began arriving on the scene, their vans pulling up just outside the police tape. Cameras were hoisted onto shoulders, microphones extended, trained on the unfolding suburban drama. They captured compelling footage, the Hazmat team methodically finishing their decontamination procedures, police officers securing the scene, paramedics conferring with Mark. And then, the undeniable main event. Carolyn Fletcher, president of the Maple Creek HOA, still loudly protesting about property values, aesthetic harmony, and her violated rights, being firmly but professionally guided into the back seat of a marked police car. The perp walk, starkly illuminated by the flashing red and blue emergency lights against the backdrop of the setting sun, was broadcast live across the city's evening news channels. Mark turned and went back inside his strangely quiet house. The acrid smell had largely dissipated, replaced by the fainter, cleaner scent of the neutralizing agents used by Hazmat. Lily was sitting up on her bed, the small pediatric oxygen mask still faithfully in place, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny, Patches, with fierce determination. The paramedics had given her a thorough check and a clean bill of health on site, but had reiterated the recommendation to keep the supplemental oxygen going for a little while longer as a precautioner. Why measure? She looked small, vulnerable, and scared, but her eyes lit up with relief when she saw him enter the room. "Is the smelly monster gone now, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice slightly muffled by the mask. Mark knelt beside her bed, gently pulling her into a warm, careful hug, mindful of the oxygen tubing. "Yes, Lilybug," he murmured against her hair. "The bad smell is all gone. The firefighters cleaned everything up super well. And the person who made the bad smell, she's gone too. She won't be bothering us anymore." He glanced out her bedroom window. One of the firefighters, moving with surprising gentleness, was carefully gathering some of Lily's other plush toys that had been inadvertently left sitting on the porch swing near the contaminated tank. He placed them gently one by one into a clean, clear plastic bag, presumably to avoid any potential cross-contamination. Lily saw him too. "Are they saving Bun's friends?" she asked, her voice filled with concern for her stuffed animal companions. Mark smiled. "Yes, sweetie. They're making sure everyone is safe, even the bunnies." A few minutes later, a firefighter, his SCBA mask off now, his face streaked with sweat and grime, knocked gently on the open bedroom doorframe. "Marshal Henderson? Just wanted to let you know, air quality is clear throughout the entire house. Readings are normal. And, we wanted to return these." He held out the clear plastic bag containing Lily's slightly bewildered-looking plush toys. Gave the outside of the bag a good wipe down with Deccan solution, just in case. Mark took the bag, feeling a fresh wave of gratitude. "Thank you. Seriously, thank you for everything your team did today." The firefighter smiled warmly, his gaze shifting to Lily. "Glad we could help out, little miss. You were very brave." Lily, feeling considerably braver now that the immediate danger had passed, pulled down her oxygen mask slightly, offering a shy smile. "Thank you for saving my garden," she said earnestly, pointing towards the bag of rescued stuffed animals. The firefighter chuckled, a deep, warm sound, and gave her a gentle, gloved high five before heading back out to join his crew. Later that evening, long after Sarah had returned home, her initial horror giving way to immense, tearful relief, and after Lily, thoroughly bathed and reassured, was finally tucked safely into bed, asleep beneath her favorite unicorn duvet, Mark stood at the living room window, looking out at the now quiet street. The flashing lights, the sirens, the emergency vehicles, the police tape, except for a small section still fluttering faintly around his porch railing, and the intrusive news vans were all gone. An eerie, almost unnatural calm had settled over Maple Creek. The yellow hazmat tape around the porch served as a stark, jarring reminder of the afternoon's terror. His personal cell phone rang, startling him. He glanced at the caller ID, Police Captain Miller. He answered quickly. "Mark Henderson." "Mark, it's Dave Miller. Just wanted to give you a quick update on our end." The captain's voice was professional but held an undercurrent of disbelief. "Fletcher's been processed and booked downtown. We're hitting her with everything we can make stick, and believe me, there's plenty." He listed the charges. Felony reckless endangerment, multiple counts, actually, given the potential exposure to the neighborhood. Assault on a disabled minor, that one solid given Lily's status and the deliberateness of the act. Willful and malicious destruction of property, that medical equipment isn't cheap. Plus, multiple environmental code violations related to the unlawful disposal and release of a hazardous material. The captain continued, "The district attorney's office is already keenly interested, especially with your expert testimony as fire marshal, the multiple corroborating neighbor witness statements, and Dr. Ramirez's letter you provided. Honestly, Mark, the body cam footage is absolutely damning. Her extended rant about property values and aesthetic bylaws while your daughter was potentially suffocating inside? It's not a good look for her defense, to put it mildly." "Good," Mark said, his voice tight with residual anger. "Make absolutely sure it all sticks, Dave." "We will," the captain assured him. "And Mark? We pulled her background records as soon as we got her downtown. Seems our Mrs. Fletcher has a documented history of harassment complaints stemming from previous HOAs she was involved with in other states. Nothing quite this extreme, obviously nothing involving hazmat incidents, but definitely a clear pattern of escalating intimidation tactics and abuse of power. We're also taking a preliminary look into the Maple Creek HOA's financials. Her level of absolute, unilateral control might have tempted her in other areas besides just enforcing paint color rules." The captain paused for a moment. "There's already some serious talk among the detectives and the DA's office about pursuing potential asset forfeiture against her property, given the significant severity of the endangerment and the substantial costs incurred by the city today for the multi-agency emergency response. Dumping industrial bleach directly onto a pressurized medical oxygen tank. The sheer recklessness is just staggering. She needs to be held fully accountable," Mark said quietly, picturing Lily's small, trusting face. "For what she did to Lily. For everyone in this neighborhood she's terrorized over the years. She will be, Mark. Count on it," the captain promised. "Try and get some rest. You and your family have had one hell of a day." Mark hung up the phone, feeling a profound, bone-deep sense of exhaustion settle over him. But it was mingled with a grim, undeniable satisfaction. The wheels of justice, though sometimes slow, were beginning their steady, inexorable grind. He looked back towards Lily's room, where her unicorn nightlight cast a soft, comforting glow into the hallway. She was safe. In the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. The following morning, news of Carolyn Fletcher's dramatic arrest dominated the local news cycle, splashed across websites and morning television reports. The story, bolstered by eyewitness accounts and official statements, painted her exactly as she was, an out-of-control, power-obsessed HOA president whose fanatical obsession with arbitrary rules and appearances had culminated in a dangerous, criminal act endangering a child and the wider community. The public condemnation was swift and widespread. Shockwaves rippled through Maple Creek itself. An emergency HOA meeting was hastily called by the remaining, shell-shocked board members. They moved quickly to distance themselves publicly and unequivocally from Carolyn's actions, issuing a formal, written apology to the Henderson family, which was hand-delivered by a visibly shaken HOA treasurer. There was immediate talk of dissolving the current board entirely, scrapping the overly punitive sections of the bylaws, and starting completely fresh, with a renewed focus on actual community well-being and mutual respect, rather than obsessive aesthetic tyranny. Weeks slowly bled into months. The legal process moved forward with deliberate speed. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence, Mark's professional and personal testimony, the damning body camera footage capturing her rants, numerous neighbor statements corroborating past harassment and witnessing the incident. The detailed Hazmat team reports, the medical evidence concerning Lily, and her own incriminating words captured during the arrest. Carolyn Fletcher eventually accepted a plea deal, advised by her lawyers that a trial outcome would likely be far worse. She pleaded guilty to felony reckless endangerment and felony assault on a minor with a disability enhancement. The judge, during sentencing, delivered a scathing rebuke, citing the extreme vulnerability of the young victim, Fletcher's blatant disregard for human safety over trivial aesthetic concerns, and her complete, demonstrable lack of remorse during and immediately after the incident. He sentenced her to a significant term in state prison. Furthermore, due to the costly, multi-agency emergency response necessitated solely by her reckless actions, substantial civil penalties were levied against her. Proceedings for asset forfeiture against her prized two-story colonial house, the very property value she so fanatically claimed to be protecting through her reign of terror, were initiated by the city to recoup the expenses. The irony was lost on no one. Maple Creek began, slowly but surely, to heal. The last vestiges of yellow hazmat tape finally came down from Mark's porch railing. Mark, after careful research and consultation with the newly reformed, and far more reasonable, HOA board, installed a secure, locked, fire code-approved storage box on the side of the house for the rep. Lacement emergency oxygen tank, blending seamlessly with the siding. Lily played freely and joyfully in her own front yard again, her bright laughter echoing in the warm afternoon sun, no longer under the chilling shadow of Carolyn Fletcher's judgmental, disapproving gaze. The entire neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, the oppressive atmosphere lifting, the air finally, truly clear. Mark, standing beside Sarah, watched Lily chase butterflies near the flower bed they had planted together by the porch. He reached down, taking Lily's small hand in his as she paused to show him a brightly colored beetle. In that simple, peaceful moment, he knew they had found their home. Not despite the terrifying ordeal they had endured, but perhaps, in a strange way, strengthened by their resilience in overcoming it. Justice, tangible and satisfying, had been served, and peace, genuine and lasting, had finally, blessedly, returned to Maple Creek.